Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AfterShock Happy Hour and Live Sale. I'm your host and the Senior Retailer Relations Manager here at AfterShock Comics, RuthAnn Thompson. We have a jam-packed show for you today with special guest, but before that, we're going to start a brand new segment where you get to meet the ambassadors, which we have 45 across the US and Canada. So I'm bringing in today our ambassador in Philadelphia, Korey Bell. Hello, good sir. How are you?
Hello, RuthAnn. How are you? Thank you
I
for
am
having me.
good. Thank you so much for joining and cheers and welcome to the happy
Cheers.
hour, sir. Hello and cheers to all of you that are watching. I see C-list E-Man, Paul Dunn and Adam Curling have already joined. Welcome, welcome. So let's get started with just finding out a little bit about you, Korey. So what brought you into the geek pop culture world and then what brought you to Aftershock Comics?
I've been collecting since 1985, believe it or not. My cousin, we went to the movies, and next to the movie theater was a candy shop, and they had a spinner rack. And he bought me my first comic, which was, I think, Superman Annual Number 11, the Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons one with the Black Mercy with the plant and all that.
Yeah.
And I was hooked. So from there, I just bought comics every week. And back then, they were Fridays, and then it went to Wednesdays. But it's been such a passion of mine, and I just been enjoying it all this time.
It's so fantastic. So we've been so excited to have you a part of the team. Tell us a little bit about like what have been your favorite comic books recently, like in this last month. What's really been your favorite picks?
I love Bunny Mask and the finale. I think that was last month. The Heathens was a surprise. I wasn't sure what it was going to be about. I saw the description, but it wasn't gelling. And then I read the first issue, and I was like, all these cool characters that I had no idea, like their origin and history. And that's one of the main things I like about Aftershock. I always learn something when I read the books, and a lot of it's historical references. And I just enjoyed the Heathens a lot. And then Search for Who, I enjoyed the second issue. I enjoyed the first issue, but the second issue was really great. It started gelling for me. The art is fantastic, and I've been really loving that as it comes out. And then Chicken Devil, of course, I thought was wonderful. It was like Breaking Bad to me, and a couple other different wild things all smashed into one. And yeah, they're the main ones I'm reading right now. But I'm reading all of them, but they're the ones I grab, the top of the pile every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we already have some people commenting saying like, oh, having let's see, having the ambassadors on is so great from C-List E-Man. And John says, nice, the ambassador that comes into the store here has definitely been helpful. So the
Very cool.
Aftershock Ambassador Program, if for those that don't know, we have awesome people like Korey all around the US and Canada that come into shops once a month and bring in some awesome promotional materials, bring in the ambassador variants every month, and just kind of teach them about our title. So, which are the shops that you visit in the Philadelphia area, Korey?
I have 8 stores, Ruth Ann, and I just heard all the names. I'm like, okay, I'll take them all because they're all great stores, and I had been to them before. And each time I visit the store, it's like going to like an alternate universe because every store does things differently. There's different clientele. They have different types of toys and posters, and some do magic cards, some don't, but they all have Aftershock, obviously. And I just love going to each store and getting to know everybody because I've always been on the other side of things as a fan, but now I get, a little bit of a stipend to go visit and do something I really love and be able to get out the house and do something really cool. So my stores are Showcase Comics, which are in Swarthmore and Bryn Mawr, 2 different locations. Brave New Worlds, which are also in, one's in Philly and one's in Willow Grove.
Mhm.
And then New Wave Comics, which is in Skippack, PA. Fat Jack's Comic Crypt, which is in the Center City, Philadelphia. And Atomic City Comics, which is on South Street in Philly. So I didn't miss anything. That's 8 different stores I get to visit.
Yeah, and which one of these were your shops before you even became ambassador? Were you visiting all of them, or was there a few that were like your main LCSs?
I'd say my main well, Swarthmore, no, Bryn Mawr actually, Showcase Comics was one of my LCSs. Because if you've been reading as long as me, sometimes you have multiple LCSs. So I would go to one store, then I definitely would go to the Bryn Mawr store, Showcase Comics, and kind of pick up some books I might have been missed. So I'd say Bryn Mawr was the first one. And then I've been to all the other ones except for maybe the one, what's really far out, the Wade's Comic Madness, which I don't think I mentioned. Wade's Comic Madness is in Levittown. So that's about an hour from me. So that's the one I hadn't really been to before, but I enjoy going there as well. But I would say the ones in Swarthmore and Bryn Mawr are closest to my home in Downingtown, PA.
Yeah, that's so great. And I wanted to bring you on as our first ambassador because of several reasons, but also you had a child recently and you actually
Yes.
made a onesie, an aftershock onesie for the Nugget, and it's just too cute.
Oh, thank you. Now, in my other life, I'm a school counselor, and we do a lot of things like therapeutic, like how to relax and things we can do with the kids. And we have a cricket machine in our school library, and one of the other counselors knew how to cricket, and I was like, help me make some things. My baby's coming. So we made an AfterShock, and we made a Green Lantern onesie, and it was really cool. And yeah,
Adorable.
he's already outgrown it, so I have to get a new one now. But definitely more coming.
Oh yeah, you're parenting. You're doing it right. Well, Korey, thank you so much for joining today. And like for all those in Philly, if you visit those shops, now you know who to talk to if you have any questions about AfterShock.
Thank you, RuthAnn, for having me. And can I give one shout out to Mike Clark, who's another ambassador? He helped me get into this back in April. I went to one of his stores called the Comic Store in Lancaster, PA. He had, a presentation there for AfterShock, and I just got hooked. He talked about the books, and he really was excited about what he was, trying to sell to us, and it sucked me in. And because of that, he asked me if I wanted to be an ambassador, and then you guys, took me on. So I want to thank Mike for even giving me this opportunity, and you guys for having me here.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's also been one of our longest running ambassadors. So we look forward to having him on the show soon as well. So Korey, thank you again for joining. And for everybody watching, stick around. And then we're going to have the incredible Mark Sable on. So stay tuned. Oh, hey, it's Ru from the AfterShock Epicenter again. I just want to remind you guys we have an Epicenter every single Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern to talk about all the latest titles coming out for New Comic Book Day. And we have another happy hour planned for December 2nd with special guest, Bunny Mask creator, as well as My Date with Monsters creator, Paul Tobin. And for the live sale, we're going to have a happy hour special exclusive cover by Mike Ruth of Maniac of New York, The Bronx is Burning #1. So I look forward to seeing you then. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the happy hour and live sale. Next up, we have the incredible writer for film, TV, Boom, Image, DC, and now also with AfterShock Comics, Mark Sable. Hello, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, RuthAnn.
Thank you so much for joining. I've been so excited to have you on. As soon as we came up with the idea at New York Comic Con, I was like, "Oh, right, yes, we need to have you on here because we have the so much awesome stuff from you, and we have another book coming out with you. So it's just perfect timing all around. So cheers to you, good sir. Welcome, welcome.
Yes, cheers.
And of course, I have so many questions for you, but everybody in the chat, please, any questions you have for Mark, please put them in the chat and I'll make sure to ask them. So what we love to ask all of our creatives when they first come on is all about how they first got started. So what was the first comic book that you remember picking up as a kid?
Okay, it was an Avengers comic. I don't remember the number. I want to say it's 187 or something like that, but it was like, there was this giant robot named like Red Ronin in it, and I just remember being, and like it used to fight Godzilla, but the Avengers were like fighting it and get inside of it, and I remember thinking that was incredibly cool. I picked it up at a flea market with my parents picked it up for me, but I picked it out, so that felt very special.
I love it. I love it. So was that the first thing that you're like, this is what I want to do? Or was there something other than like that, like specifically you're like, this is it. I have to do this for my living.
I don't think it was that early that I had that moment. I think it took a while for me to like realize that this was a possible thing. But it was, so I went from there to, I collected X-Men and G.I. Joe. I remember they used to come out, like I got subscriptions to them when you had to like cut them out from the like,
Right?
like actually cut up your comic to send it in. I mean, I guess theoretically you could have photocopied it, but I didn't know that. And then the theme of my bar mitzvah was Marvel comics. So it was like I had a Marvel in all caps, marvelous time at Mark's bar mitzvah and it was on the T-shirt, and I couldn't find one, but even though I'm at my mom's, that's my childhood home, but it was a picture of me in like an Iron Man outfit and like me wearing like even thicker, wider glasses than these, but like with the helmet off. So yeah, it took a while, there was a long detour from that to like I was in law school, I went to, all this stuff, but comics have always been a love, and I've been, I've just been so fortunate to be able to do it.
Yeah, and so now I didn't know this about you until doing some research, but you've been also teaching a lot. So you were an instructor at the MFA visual, or that's what you're doing now, visual narrative program, and then before you were a writing instructor at Writers Boot Camp. So was it that you just were like, all right, now I want to pass on my knowledge? What kind of inspired you to say, like, I'm going to do comics and write for film and TV, and then I'm also going to teach other people to do it?
So I mean, the writing the writing for comics thing happened because I mean, I went to grad school for dramatic writing, where I learned how to, basically they didn't have comics classes. It was only film, TV, and plays. Then I went to law school because I was freaking out in my 20s that I was never going to get work as a writer. And there may have been a little bit of parental pressure there too. But but while I was in law school, I had a story that I was like, I need to do this as a comic. I had saved some money up from working at a law firm and found this great artist, Paul Azaceta, and I did my first book, Grounded. I had been taking writing classes like privately at this place called the Writers Boot Camp in LA. And I can tell this is a funny way that I got a job teaching there, was that I was like, they had like an exit interview when you left, like after you pay for the class. And I just told them all the things that I thought was wrong with their program. And it's fun. It's great. Like I was, and then they wound up hiring me to write. And I have to say, it is really enjoyable. I love teaching. So now I'm at SVA, and what's great about it, I think, selfishly, what's great about it is just that writing is such a solitary profession. I love comics because I get to work with artists and editors, and everybody at AfterShock is so great. But even then, it's remote, especially during the pandemic, and it's a way of me giving back. I always feel like, but so getting to work with students is great. I think it's a way of giving me back, but I always feel like I learn so much more from my students than they can possibly learn from me. They're incredibly inspiring. So I've been doing that, teaching at SVA now since 2013. We have like such an incredibly diverse group of writers, like, not just gender, race, sexuality, all that stuff, but like they're international because we do it like partly online. And it's been great seeing them like succeed, and like, in comics or in other art forms and things like that. And so, yeah, it's really rewarding.
So obviously everybody should take your class, but if we get one little nugget of like what advice you would have for any up and coming writers and visual storytellers that you wish you knew coming into the industry.
Okay, that's a really good question. I think, I remember being told, write what early on, and I took that very literally. And then once I remember when I started grad school, they were like, well, okay, don't worry about, we'll teach you everything everything you need to know how to write. You just have to have any stories. And I'm like, oh no, that's the one thing I don't have, because I was like 22. And if you just write what you literally know, that's, I felt like I pretty much had run out of life experiences to write about at that point. But so I would say, I mean, go and live life and have lots of experiences. That's probably most important advice. But more important than that, I think, is just don't, write what you love, write the things that interest you. And I always feel I tell this to my students all the time, just like, don't try to predict what's going to sell, because it's impossible to do that. I mean, maybe some people can do it. I certainly can't, but I feel like when you truly write or draw or, create whatever the thing that you love, like, you'll be doing your best work, and people will see that. People will be able to see that genuine enthusiasm, and they'll be able to see, the flip side is they'll be able to see the lack of it. Like if you're just trying to hack something out because you think it'll sell.
Yeah, at the same time, it almost feels like the copy and paste that you used to do, or like people would do for essays and stuff. Like people can tell if it's not really your voice and a story that you really have connection to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, speaking of some incredible storytelling, let's start talking about the titles that you have here with us at Aftershock. So, first up, we have War on Terror, God Killers. So, this you worked with artist Man House, letterer Thomas Maurer, colorist Hernan Cabrera, and cover artist Jeremy Hahn. So, this was my first introduction to you. And this is a pretty crazy thing where we follow this one guy who's an atheist, Arab American folklore. Uh, Teacher, and then he's recruited to join the God Killers, which is the special forces unit tasked with fighting insurgents that basically use mythological creatures, capture them, and uses them as weapons of mass destruction. So there is so much to unpack here. Tell us a little bit about the story from, obviously we want to hear from you about it, and where the inspirations for this came from.
So the inspirations came from a couple places. So one was, so there is this, I'm going to forget his name, but I think his name was Boykins, General Boykins. There was this American general who got into trouble, rightly so, for saying like he had they had like I forget what country it was in, if it was Africa or if it was in the Middle East, but they had captured an Islamic insurgent, and he told them like, we're gonna you're gonna talk and we're gonna beat you because my God's bigger than your God. Obviously, that got out. That's when we're trying to say that we're not waging a war against a religion, and then you say something like that, it doesn't help things. But I remember thinking, I was like, well, what if that were like not just, we're literally not true, and the enemies that we're fighting, their gods, their monsters, their mythology was real, and that would be an interesting thing. And I had that idea for a while, but I couldn't figure out an angle on it, and especially. I'd done a book at Image called Graveyard of Empires that I think, prior to the books I've done at Aftershock, I was probably best known for. And which is about US Marines fighting Taliban and the Taliban teaming up to fight zombies in Afghanistan. And so I've always had this interest in like war and conflict, but I wrote that, and I also had the experience of being a guest at the first Middle East Comic-Con in Dubai. And I had such a wonderful experience there. Everybody was incredibly nice to me. That like it was the first Comic-Con, so like they were so thrilled. And of course I have like Muslim friends in the U.S., but it's like it was my first time in the Middle East, and seeing just how different it was than I think it's portrayed in the media. Like I felt like, well, I hadn't written a story from the perspective of an Arab American or a Muslim, and I felt like if I was going to tell this story, it needed to have that, so that it just didn't become this like jingoistic American thing. So I'd also had this thought of like, okay, so I had this, and then I sort of put in my own like sort of struggles with faith into this character. So the main character is a Muslim American. He teaches folklore. He's an Army reservist. He teaches folklore, but and specializes in Islamic folklore, but like doesn't really believe. He's an atheist or an agnostic until he has this experience where he basically has an encounter with a supernatural being, and it freaks him out because it goes from like, okay, he has this act of cowardice at first because he's afraid to die because he doesn't think there's an afterlife, and then after that, then he's like, wait, I don't know if there's a good afterlife, but like there's definitely these bad things. So, then he's recruited into this team, which is they're all Americans, but they all come from different ethnic and religious backgrounds. And they basically go around the world dealing with these different insurgencies and that are like where they're using these monsters as weapons of mass destruction. So like the first one, and the other thing I wanted to do is I felt like, I'd already dealt with Afghanistan. I felt like Iraq had already been talked about, but I know there's so many conflicts that are going on that places in America are at war, are either not at war with, but at war with people in, that we just don't see on the news. So like the Philippines, Yemen or Syria, at the time. And so I said, I'd like to highlight these places. And I'd also want to be able to show, also be able to start to use monsters that you just don't see in, that we haven't seen in other books. So move away from things like zombies and vampires, which I love, but just and really just sort of so got to do a lot of research in it. And I was able to, so because of that trip, those, having gone to that Comic-Con, I had made friends there in the Middle East from various different countries. So I had them, like I had a Muslim creator from a Filipino Muslim creator and a Palestinian Muslim creator, both, and I'm just a Jewish kid from Long Island. I was like, read the script, make sure that I'm, if not getting things, hopefully getting things right, but like definitely not, offending anybody, and that I'm being respectful to the culture, because you can only do so much research, and then you want other people's experience. And they were very kind and seemed to really like it. So I don't know. That's obviously they can't speak for the entire world, but it was cool to sort of get their perspective on it, and just talk with them and learn things that I wouldn't have, that you just wouldn't pick up from a book.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that in the storyline, because I was sure, like, I'm surprised that you only traveled there once, because it had so much just complete fullness to the world, to the story, to the characters, to the folklore and all that kind of stuff. And Kevin Perez actually had the same question I did, was what was the inspiration, because I was like, wow, the chat's going nuts, so I can hardly keep up with it. Let me see his. So what he wanted to say is that he just loved the blending of the gritty military action drama with supernatural folklore, especially of other cultures that we don't typically get to see. So for you, why was it important to have that that the lead character was, of that specific descent, but also atheist? Like, why was it important for this story to be told kind of from his perspective?
Well, I think, I think because I had told stories already that were, in that were in Middle East or South Asia and things like that, I felt like, okay, I looked at my work and I was like, yeah, I've had supporting characters that were people of color or from that were international, but not like, I had not had an Arab American protagonist. You don't see that in many other books. And I thought it's just always interesting for me to write somebody new. So that's part of it. I also thought it's an interesting position. I think it's also a metaphor for, I think how, I don't want to speak for all or even a lot of Arab Americans, but I know some that feel, conflicted, especially those that serve in the military, where I thought that was an interesting conflict for them to explore, of like, okay, they're patriotic, but they're going to constantly get questioned about their patriotism because of, the color of their skin, their last name, their religious practices. At the same time, the atheist thing that came from, I mean, I don't identify as an atheist. I'm more agnostic, Jewish, but I think everybody, I think we all have struggles with faith. And for me, that was the flaw for him to sort of explore and see if he could overcome, was, coming to grips with this faith. I felt that it was important that there was a personal story alongside all the cool monster stuff that Mon drew. And, so I should also mention, I also did a ton of research from the military side. So I have this sort of, my other job, in addition to writing comics and teaching, is I do consult as a futurist, sometimes with the military, sometimes with government or non-governmental organizations, basically because I write a lot of sci-fi or and things that also have to do with the military, well, what do I think the future might be like? And I don't predict anything for them, but I try to get them to approach things creatively. So as a result of that, I've made a lot of contacts and friends in the military, and not just in the US military, and other militaries as well. I work with the Australian Navy of submariners, I guess they call them there. I always want to call them submariners because of comics, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I felt like, okay, well, I got that part covered, but I wanted to bring the same authenticity to that I did to the folklore and the and the characters that I did to the getting all the weapons and the helicopters and stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's just all so beautiful. And we also got a comment from Paul Dunn saying that the cover is just amazing. The artwork from him is so perfect from Mon House. Tell us a little bit of what it was like working with him and kind of what it was like describing these monsters and then having him create it and kind of that whole process with you guys.
It was incredible. He's, I guess everybody's going to say nice things about their artist, right? But it's funny because I think we both got to see him in person at New York Comic Con, and he's the sweetest guy because it's so funny because when you see you see all this monstrous artwork come in, I'm sure people think that when they see my scripts, they're like, okay, wait, I expected you to just be like really, really dark, but he's just he's the sweetest guy. But it was incredible. It really is. I've told people it's great having something published, but my favorite part of working in comics is just when the art comes in. And literally everything was not only as good as I imagined, but better. Not just character design, but storytelling wise. Obviously, you mentioned the cover. We should shout out Jeremy Hahn and Nick Filardi too. Nick did the colors on the cover, and Jeremy has now done covers for me for 2 different books for Miskatonic as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But Jeremy is a good friend as well as an artist. So that was like, when I found out he might be available for covers, I was like, can you please do it? And has just been, I think, such a huge part. I really feel like he deserves a ton of credit for the books selling the way they have, just because they're just so arresting. If wasn't my book, I would pick them up off the stands for it. In fact, I just bought a cover from one of the books from him. He didn't even want me to pay, but I was insisted. He was really nice about it, but I was like, I need to own some original art from it because it's so incredible.
Yeah, and speaking of Jeremy Hahn, he also did the cover art for Miskatonic as well. So this is your other title with us. That's also like speaking of monsters, and this is where you had artist Giorgio Pontarelli and colorist Pippa Bowland, letterer Thomas Maurer, and then again cover artist Jeremy Hahn, and then Nick Filardi as well did some stuff. So this is I love how like completely different this story is, because in this one we follow the brilliant hard-nosed investigator Miranda Keller, who was sent by J. Edgar Hoover to uncover what he thinks are communist bombings, but are actually something much more nefarious and cultish. So the time period is amazing. So what for you, because it was perfect timing, like in the world of pop culture, because Lovecraft Country just came out, so everyone was very much in the Cthulhu Lovecraft mood. So for you, where did the inspirations of this come from?
So, I mean, part of it obviously comes from being an H.P. Lovecraft fan. I mean, a fan of his work, not a fan of him as a person. I mean, that's I should say that.
Yes.
Say that up front. And I mean, that's always been the trick, right? Like, I think so. For years, I remember when I first started reading his stories, I was like, oh, somebody should just find a way to do like a comic or a TV series that strings this stuff together. Lovecraft Country, it's interesting. I mean, it came on the air after I'd written this, but I'd read the book, which and so I've seen some of the show, which is good. I thought the book's fantastic, but but what Lovecraft Country did, and I felt like I would need to do, is obviously, I think Lovecraft stories are brilliant. I just was talking with a student journalist interviewed me about the impact of Lovecraft on pop culture, and it's like you forget. I think he's like one of these authors where I think now more people have heard of him, but like my mom hasn't heard of him, but everybody has read something that's been touched by him in some way, whether it's like The Thing or Alien or there's or Stephen King's work. Like there's always some it has some influence on it. So, but at the same time, definitely there's a lot of racism in his work and anti-Semitism and anti-immigrant feeling and sexism. So I was like, well, okay, how do I do it? And I think the race angle I felt was covered. Lovecraft Country covered it really well. There's a book by an author named Victor Laval called Black Tom, which is also covers Lovecraft from the race angle really well. So I was like, well, but Lovecraft has no female protagonists in any of his stories, and barely has any women characters. And there's some Freudian things about why, and especially if you look at his monsters, about you may have some fears there. But so that was part of it. Was like, okay, but I also thought well, it would be cool if you were going to adapt his stories to do them in the time period that he wrote them. And I was researching that, and I heard about what was like America's first Red Scare. So, when I hear the words Red Scare, I think of like the 50s and McCarthy, but like in the 20s, led by J. Edgar Hoover, who was then working for the Attorney General. Then he headed what became the Bureau of Investigation. He led this, like, there were some series of anarchist bombings, but they used that as an excuse. The Attorney General used that as an excuse to like round up literally tens of thousands of like quote unquote subversive people. And most of them wound up being immigrants. A lot of them wound up being deported. Eventually, like, the court stepped in and were like, these people, I mean, they were arrested without like probable cause. Like, they like threw out all the arrests, but Hoover was somehow able to like parlay that and instill into like becoming, one of the most powerful figures in American history. And the more I read about Hoover, first of all, I saw all these parallels with Lovecraft where, okay, he's also this like racist, xenophobic guy. Obviously he had a lot more power. And then I was like, again, trying to think of women protagonists, I was like, okay, well, it'd be cool to have an FBI agent like investigate what was going on in Lovecraft stories. And I looked and I was like, there were only 3 women in what was then called the Bureau of Investigation. There were 3 women in agent roles when Hoover took over. And then within a few years, they were all gone. And there were no women in the FBI other than like in secretarial and support roles for like 70 years, because Hoover didn't give up that job until he died. And when I looked up, like, one of those women, like, was committed into what we would then call like, a mental asylum. And I was like, oh, that's just like what happens to almost every character in a Lovecraft thing. So I was like, well, I didn't want to use her specifically. So it was kind of a blend of all them in a creation, but I felt like here is this character who, it automatically, in a similar way to the main character of God Killers, it's like, here's somebody who's like in an institution, who's great at what they do, but is not respected for it. I think she's a little less, I mean, her flaw, if anything, might be that she believes too much in this institution. So I think she's a lot more competent than the protagonist of God Killer starts out. And then we pair her up with this character from a Lovecraft story called the Horror of Red Hook, named Tom Malone, who was a New York police detective, and from that story has PTSD. And so I set up this like X-Files dynamic between them, where it's like
she even has like the red hair too, like she's like almost funny. Exactly, it's great.
I have to I guess I have to credit to either Giorgio or to Pippa, because I don't think I ever specified her hair color. I think there are a couple places I specify like eye color because it's important to some other characters. Mm-hmm. And so I will give them credit for that, but it does work like that. And I've always, I loved the X-Files. It wasn't something I like necessarily consciously thought of, but that dynamic just sort of came and I liked it. I just liked that idea, and it gave me a way to tell those stories, and like give them a different context by like actually showing people things that like either maybe Lovecraft wasn't aware of at the time, or just wouldn't have cared about from his point of view, like all this political stuff going on, all this, I wanted it to have the feel of a noir story in addition to being a horror story. And hopefully I achieved that.
You absolutely did. It's amazing, and there's a reason that we have the next one coming up. But before we get to that, Lady Grayson had a great question. With something like Miskatonic, how do you balance your own creativity with such a beloved established lore?
That's a really good question, and I hope that I did.
But you did, by the way.
What the goal is, well, I mean, it's obviously that's in the eye of the beholder. So like, I mean, I tried to treat the Lovecraft stories as if they actually happened, right? Like, so, but that they're being told from his point of view. So, I mean, I did take some liberties, because if I was just writing his stories, then like, there's no need to do. I mean, there's plenty of great Lovecraft adaptations that exist that do it straight, and that's a valid way of doing it, but it wouldn't be that interesting to me, and I guess it probably wouldn't have been that interesting to AfterShock either. So but yeah, so I try to treat them like they happened. I maybe like basically try to keep them in the years that they did, and like political events and things like that, and the locations. the characters. There may have just been like, I just kind of had like, okay, these are things that happen, but like this story is showing it from a different point of view. And like, okay, Lovecraft, like I'm imagining that he's just like a historian that doesn't have access to all the facts that J. Edgar Hoover secretly has in his files, along with the largest collection of pornography in the world, evidently.
Evidently. Ooh. Also, Lady Grayson just made a great like little coined word for what you basically created, which is like a noir horror. See if I don't know if I can pronounce that right. Noir.
I can picture the word, and it probably looks great. And there's no way, especially even with just a little bit of wine, I can pronounce it.
Yeah. So we have
you.
next week coming out Miskatonic, Even Death May Die, Prestige One Shock. 48 pages format. So this is going to be a kind of continuation of the Miskatonic, the 5 issues that we have in the complete series trade paperback. So this continues the story. So after the horrifying events in Miskatonic Valley, speaking of the female characters ending up in kind of insane asylums, that's Miranda is in a Deep One concentration camp, and now he's trying to get her out of it. So how much can you tell us about this story coming out next week without spoilers?
Yeah, so it's tricky because the ending definitely goes, it literally picks up where the story leaves off. And I felt it was with Miskatonic, I had no idea that I'd be lucky enough to get the chance to tell more stories in this world. I was hoping I would, but I wanted readers to feel like they had a definitive ending, right? Like there are some, I didn't tie up every single loose end, but it's like, yeah, it's a dark ending. But once I got, we talked about it and the editorial at AfterShock was great enough to say, hey, do you want to do this like giant? So it's not only, it's 40 pages, but it's also like magazine size. It's the giant size format that you guys have, which I love. And so I said, okay, yeah, great. I had already had thoughts of like, there were Lovecraft stories I hadn't touched. One of them being Call of Cthulhu. In fact, I had originally wanted to call this like Miskatonic Call of Cthulhu, but copyright reasons it didn't, and other reasons it didn't. I actually think this is a better title, and it doesn't spoil anything to say Cthulhu's involved because he's on the cover. But it's in an interesting way. I think I think yes, the events of that story take place, but it's more about, it's focusing on the characters. And then the goal with the book also was like, if you're a Lovecraft fan, it's great, you can read this and there are going to be Easter eggs that you will appreciate. I definitely have done the work of reading all his stories and multiple times, but I hopefully, and it feels like the feedback I certainly got on Miskatonic was like, you don't need to read Lovecraft to get it. Like you see a monster, you don't need to know what it is. Like, as long as hopefully they're good characters. And that was the really exciting part about this, was just like, I love Miranda Keller, now, former FBI agent by the time this novel comes out, by the time the special comes out, and Tom Malone. And I felt like there was still more to tell with them. And I think this gives an even, again, without spoiling anything, an even more definitive ending. Not saying you still couldn't do more, but I think it's even, and it's, especially being in that big size, I think it allows for like literally just this bigger backdrop. And it's in the first Miskatonic, everything takes place in the Miskatonic Valley, which is this fictional area of New England, like by Salem is where like Arkham, was supposed to be where Arkham was. This like goes literally around the world. Like, so yeah, there are these, the concentration camps were actually come from the end of not like, I'm making allusions to like the Japanese internment camps and later the camps in Europe. And, Jewish, I come from a family where we have survivors, but also, Lovecraft himself like had the deep ones in the story, The Shadow of Innsmouth, like these half human hybrids, like sent to concentration camps. And so it's like, I'm not just adding something in, or I'm not just trying to like, appropriate these historical events. It like, they do seem to blend together. So it's, showing things from that side, and, there's an investigation going on. There's, Miranda trying to break out, and then there's more just supernatural, shenanigans. And I think, Giorgio really outdid himself on this. Again, just so great. Pippa, this is the first book Nick Filardi, who does the color for the covers, I've worked with many times. He's the first colorist I ever worked with, and he's great. But Pippa I have to give credit to Christina Harrington, found her, and she's just been a gem. She and Giorgio just have this, Pippa's in England, Giorgio's in Italy, and somehow they've found this magic working together. That is just, it's just such a pleasure to get those pages. And so I think if you enjoyed the first Miskatonic, you're going to love it. If not, I hope, if you're a horror or noir fan, I think you're going to really like it.
Yeah, and so that Miskatonic Even Death May Die, the 48-page prestige one-shock format, that is going to be in shops for this coming Wednesday for New Comic Book Day on November 24th. So make sure you pick that up. And both War on Terror, God Killers, and Miskatonic, the first trade paperback of all the first 5 issues, are in your shops as we speak. So make sure you get those. And Mark, thank you so much for joining. Where can everybody follow you on the social meets?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, RuthAnn. This is fun. I've watched these, so it's been fun to actually be on one. So you can find me just at Mark Sable, MarkSable, both on Twitter and on Instagram. Please hit me up there. Like if you ask me a question, and it's not like, I'll answer it. I'm like, unless it's super offensive in some way, which I don't know. Everybody's been really nice to me on social media, so nothing bad has happened yet. I don't know how I've managed to avoid that, but yeah, I love interacting with readers, and so please hit me up there.
Fabulous. Well, it has been such an honor and pleasure to hang out with you again, this time virtually. So thank you again. And for everybody watching, please stick around, and we're going to have the live sale. We're going to have the 2 trade paperbacks, as well as some incredible other incentives and exclusive variants available for a fraction of the cost, coming right up. Oh, hey, it's Rue from the AfterShock Epicenter. I just wanted to remind you guys that we had some incredible titles that came out just this last Wednesday for New Comic Book Day. So if you haven't already, head to your local comic book shop and pick up your issue of Chicken Devil #2, Almost American #3, Shadow Doctor, the trade paperback complete series, and Dark Red Year 1 hardcover. So make sure you go pick those up. And now, back to the show. Hello, all you awesome nerds out there. Welcome back. It is now time for the world famous live sale, where you can get AfterShock exclusives and all sorts of variants for a fraction of the cost. So I'm going to go through everything that we're offering today very quickly, and then we'll open up the live sale, and then I'll go into a little bit more in-depth descriptions of everything. So first up, we have another happy hour exclusive cover from Mike Ruth for My Date with Monsters #1. So this came out just last week by Paul Tobin. Very excited about that. Next up, we have the C2E2 War on Terror God Killers #1 exclusive. We're doing that for only $10, and there's only 100 of those. So make sure you pick those up because they aren't available anywhere else. And also, we have the War on Terror God Killers #1 incentive cover for only $10. We have Miskatonic #1 incentive cover for $10. We only have 30 left of those, so make sure you get as many of those as you can. And then last but not least, we are doing a War on Terror God Killers trade paperback and Miskatonic trade paperback combo deal. So you can get both of those trade paperbacks for only $20. And we only have 20 of that available, so make sure that you grab those. All right, let's open up the live sale, and I'll talk a little bit more about these incredible titles that we have offered. So as those who have been following the happy hour for a while, Mike Ruth is just incredible, and we will always bring him in for all of our incentive covers, or sorry, our exclusive covers. So My Date with Monsters, if you missed it, this is from creator Paul Tobin. You might recognize him from the very huge hit from us, Bunny Mask. And this is a very different story. And don't let the title fool you. It is not actually a rom-com about like a dating show with monsters. This is about how reality a few years ago was torn apart by these rifts in basically dimensions that are caused by people's dreams. And the way to solve and close all of these is by basically making sure that people's dreams comes true. So it follows our main character, who she was kind of like patient zero when it came to these holes in reality, and her teenage daughter and then this monster named Croak are trying very hard to have her dream come true, which is to find her true love. So it's a very fun, dark, like twisting title. I highly suggest this. And this cover by Mike Ruth is absolutely incredible. So you definitely want to pick this up. This is like, as always, we only have about 200 of these made. We're selling it for only $15. So make sure you add that to your list. And as well as the C2E2 War on Terror God Killers #1 exclusive, that was our last convention of 2020, and luckily we had this, but we only have about 100 left, and we're selling it for only $10. So absolutely, this is a must grab for everybody who's a fan of this incredible title. I'm just checking out with all of the chat here. Oh yes, I do like to call everybody your awesome nerds and nerdettes. So thank you, promiscuous time traveler. Say that 5 times fast. Creed, will there be a showcase on the San Diego Comic-Con exclusives? Not on this show, but absolutely, we have some incredible exclusives coming up for San Diego Comic-Con. So stay tuned for that. Absolutely, on all of our social media, we'll be posting that ASAP. We also, of course, for our live sale, have the War on Terror God Killers #1 incentive cover. And this is a very beautiful one for, again, only $10. And we only have 30 of these left in stock. So make sure you grab one of these. And then for all of our Lovecraft fans, we have Miskatonic #1 incentive cover. Again, only 30 of these, and we're selling it for $10. And yeah, absolutely, this is the best way to grab both trade paperbacks if you want to catch up as fast as possible before the next issue comes out next week. Very exciting. Oh, Lady Grayson, yes, we will be at C2E2 this year. I don't remember the booth number off the top of my head, but we will be there. So for the rest of the year, we have San Diego Comic-Con this coming weekend, which is crazy. We'll be at booth 2305 through 7. Technically, it's a big old booth, and then we will be at C2E2 only 2 weeks later. So very, very stoked. Oh, Lady Grayson got the double feature. Yes. Excellent. So glad to hear that, because it's a great way to kind of get all of his work. I hope we get to work with him much more. I absolutely love talking to him. It was great. I had all these questions set up, and every time he would just talk about it, I was like, well, he covered that question. He covered that question. We're good. Done and done. And Paul Dunn got the C2E2 cover. Well done. Yes, my producer is talking to me. Yes, Stefan. Yes, I might have said the number wrong. I thought I said 2305 through 2307 correctly, but I might have said that wrong since he just was correcting me. Sorry, guys. But oh no, it was the C2E2 one that I wasn't sure of. So if anybody knows the C2E2 booth off the top of their head, let me know. But I don't think we've posted that specifically. So so yeah, for all of those that are joining for the live sale portion, make sure you grab as much as you can. And we will be coming back for another happy hour on December 2nd with Paul Tobin, the writer and creator of Bunny Mask, as well as My Date with Monsters. And we're going to have another incredible exclusive from Mike Ruth for Maniac of New York, The Bronx is Burning #1. I am so stoked for that title. So make sure you join us in only 2 weeks for that as well. And we're going to keep this going. We basically have everything booked through 2021, and very stoked for all the incredible titles coming out soon. So thank you everybody so much for joining. Hopefully you guys will just keep hitting up the live sale. This will be available for the next 24 hours. So any of you that are watching this on a rewatch, everything is still enjoying. And Brian Rowland, I'm glad that your teen daughter has loved Bunny Mask. That is a terrifying title. So I'm glad that they're enjoying it. But yes, for everybody who's watching this right now, whatever platform you're watching at, make sure you hit that follow, subscribe, notification bell, all that kind of stuff. We'll always try to be here every 2 weeks with this. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next time.